a huge debate inside the Democratic Party that's not just about 2020. It's about the new members, it's about what happened in the midterms, and it's about who's in charge. So before we go tonight, we want to show you something pretty interesting from Speaker Nancy Pelosi, addressing what has been the excitement and power of AOC's new progressive wing in the party. Here's what she said on 60 Minutes.
You have these wings, AOC and her group on one side.
That's like 5 people.
No, it's the progressive group. It's more than 5.
I'm a progressive, yeah.
Like 5 people. The distinction that Pelosi's making is that if you talk about ideology, there are many self-identified progressives in the party of various wings. But these so-called like 5 freshmen don't define the whole party. And she's also talking about what should define the party economically.
I do reject socialism as an economic system. If people have that view, that's their view. That is not the view of the Democratic Party.
And that's a difference between progressive and socialism. All of this comes after Pelosi said that AOC's Green New Deal was basically a green dream. And last week talked about AOC's social media outreach as saying, look, Twitter followers are not what ultimately matters, but rather the votes on the floor of the House. Some of this isn't about ideology. Some of it is about old school and new school, about outsider politics and insider politics, an interesting conversation within the party. And here is the message Speaker Pelosi says she wants to send her members.
By and large, whatever orientation they came to Congress with, they know that we have to hold the center, that we have to go down the mainstream.
They know that?
They do.
They know that. Hold the center. That's something that parties often talk about. Pelosi is a San Francisco progressive. She's speaking strategically about what to do. And in London today, she spoke again after there were questions about these new comments.
She's a wonderful member of Congress. I think all of our colleagues will attest. But those are districts that are solidly Democratic. And if we're going to be helping the 1 in 5 children in America who goes to sleep hungry at night, who lives in poverty in our country, we have to win.
There you see it. The speaker making it very clear she thinks AOC is wonderful, but she also wants to have this nuanced conversation. It's one we'll be following and trying to cover with all the nuance it requires. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.